Hello, Muriel. It's great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Excellent. Uh, we're going to need to hear you talk a little bit louder. Okay. That's a good loud cough. We're speaking to you from you're in the Gush.
Right.
Yeah, I know that you live in Allonsfoot, and you have had a life where you've been in a lot of places. You started in Willesden, you went to the States, and then you came to Israel. And we're going to hear about your story, about your journeys, and the journey and the story of your husband. And we've prepared a special show for you to talk about stuff. So I am just going to open that up. Okay, and it says, can you see the screen, Muriel?
Yes, very well.
Excellent. Muriel and Lou Goldman, an enigmatic courtship from Hartford to Jerusalem by way of Willesden. And everybody listening to the program is going to understand why we're calling this an enigmatic courtship. Let's start first with your childhood. And here you are in Willesden. So tell me about what Willesden was like when you were growing up as a child in the 1930s and the 1940s.
Well, I went to this Harvest Road in Willesden, Kenton Rise. There's me here, right there in the front, because I was very small, and so they put me always in the front row. And I was one of about 5 Jewish children in the whole school. And yeah. So life in Willesden was wonderful. It was peaceful. We moved into our home in Donington Road, which, by the way, if anybody wants to know, now has a bus stop right outside our door. It was a long, long road leading to the Willesden General Hospital. And to go to shul or to any other place for shops, you had to walk this whole length of Donington Road. And at the top of Donington Road was Chamberlain Road, where the Federation Shul was. It met in a school there, in a small Hebrew day school. Rabbi Lapien was the headmaster. Rabbi Lapien now lives in Ramat Eshkol in Jerusalem. And he leads tourist groups. Of course, with the coronavirus, nobody's going on trips, but he leads trips for Chagim and all.
Sorry, Muriel, I want to ask you a question. Rabbi Lapien was your head teacher. I don't want to give away your age, but you're no longer 21. How old is Rabbi Lapien?
I don't know. He wasn't my teacher, but when I used to visit from America with my son went to Cheder.
Okay.
So, but I am 95 now. I'll be 96 in December.
Ein Horeh.
The coronavirus will allow, if it will.
Now, there were a lot of shuls in your area when you were growing up. Just tell me about what you remember of the shul you went to.
When my father came into the area, he was always communal-minded and very active. And he and other people started a shul in Harlesden. And then it moved to College Road in Willesden. And they started this shul. And then they were supposed to move into a plot of land in Dobery Avenue, which was allowed. But the Federation Shul that owned the shul up in Chamberlain Road went bankrupt. And the Jewish agency, the people, what the Board of Deputies decided that the Willesden Shul should take over the Federation Shul, so there shouldn't be a scandal in the community. And so we took over that shul, which was or though the Cheder was in Chamberlain Road, the actual shul was in Heathfield Park in Warm Lane, Cricklewood, which is Wilston, also Wilston.
Oh, yes. Well, I remember going to bar mitzvahs at the function hall in Warm Lane.
They had the Max Damon function hall which they built, our shul built, and my father was Gabbai in that shul, not Gabbai, but a warden in the shul for many, many years. And Mr. Marsh used to govern there. Everybody used to know him because he came over from the Federation shul. Anyway, it was a very active shul. There were a lot of young families moved into Wilson at the time, and people who became well known, and it was a thriving community, and that's the shul where I got married.
Well, we were going to be looking at some photos of that in a little while, and you may be interested to know that although Willesden went very quiet for quite a long time Jewishly, it is now a very active area again with some thriving communities, and again with lots of young families.
Yes.
So it's had a real revitalization. Okay, so that's you as a young girl.
Yes.
Now we're going to meet the gentleman who was going to be your husband, but was somewhat older than you. By my calculation, again, I don't want to give away secrets, but it must have been about 11 or 12 years.
12 years.
Okay.
I guess was right.
And
12 years.
here he is in Hartford, Connecticut. It's a very traditional or old-fashioned bar mitzvah suit he's wearing there. I guess your husband came from a very frum family.
Yes, he came from a family very similar to ours. In fact, when I met my husband and became serious, my family contacted the rabbi in Hartford, Connecticut to find out about the family. And the answer came back from a Good Achim, Rabbi Butchig, that the family was exactly like ours, active in communal activities. Shomer Shabbos established their mikveh and their yeshiva there in Hartford, and it was so similar to our history in England.
Well, that's very fortunate.
Yeah.
But of course, you weren't to meet for quite a lot of years because at that time you were only 1 year old or 2 years old.
Right.
So let's see what happened to Lou later.
Well,
Hold on. He's bouncing interview here.
yeah, that's my husband in uniform, and we were that was outside the Cricklewood shul. Friends of ours, Iris and Henry Lander, were married there by Louis Rabinowitz, and he was the rabbi there. Our shul had Rabbi Spira, and my father got him the job at the Heathfield Park shul. Rabbi Spira lived in St. Gabriel's Road in Cricklewood, and he was from Poland, and he was a rabbi there many, many, many years until about, I don't know exactly what date it was. But anyway, that's where we were married at Heathfield Park. Now, did you want to know about
what he's asking about in the army?
Oh, yeah, he was, as I say, 12 years older than me. We didn't meet until Pesach of 1944.
Hold on.
Right, now, Lou joined the army at the age of 30, which is quite a lot older than other people would normally join the army. And you're going to tell us about what Lou did in the army.
Okay. Well, before the army, he was Internal Revenue Deputy Inspector for the New England area. And when he joined up the army, I didn't have any details about him at the time. My daughter Rika got the details from my mother-in-law, which I didn't know about. So I didn't know anything about what he. Well, he did tell me afterwards that he was working in learning radar from the British at the Navy Yards in Chicago. And he did say that. But I don't know what it meant, except I remember his mother writing to us that he had told her that he'd seen the street downstairs on a machine, which was the computer, of what was going on downstairs, way away from where he was sitting. And it was like a miracle. He did, his mother told me.
This was all, Muriel, this was all in Chicago, yes?
Yes, in Chicago.
And I must say, it's a little bit surprising because, of course, Chicago is inland on a lake. I lived there myself for many years. And the notion, it always confused me that there was a Navy yard there, because I would expect the Navy to be by the seaside. But there we go. So that's where Lou was. And Alan Turing was there at the same time?
Who?
Alan Turing. Was he there at the same time?
No, he didn't. I don't
There
think.
was work involved between his being in Princeton and in America working on similar projects. Yes.
I thought Alan was in America. And just to remind everybody who's listening, Alan Turing was the gentleman who basically oversaw the cracking of the Enigma code at Bletchley Park. So Lou was involved in doing all kinds of secret stuff, including a communication system, so that President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill could talk without fear of being listened to, which is quite a remarkable thing. Now,
Talk about the Six Sally.
You have to
Okay.
say that, Rita.
No, so there's, I don't know if I should be speaking or Mom should.
no, it's okay, Rika.
That happens to be the Six Sally, it's called.
Yeah.
The funny thing afterwards that we realized now that we finally found out the name of the project was that my father met my mother. They were living in my grandparents' house. My grandmother's maiden name was Zig.
Oh, yes. So Zig, and he was working on Sig Sally.
And even though her name was Sarah, they called her Sally. So here he was working on a project called Sig Sally, and he was living with a Sally Zig mom.
Well, as you know, we're going to be talking about, learning a little bit about the Zigs later on in the presentation. So Lou's working in the army in the USA in Chicago, and he needs to come to London and bring some stuff with him. Whoop. Let's see what's going to happen next. Here's the Enigma machine. Wow, it's such a big thing. And I understand that he was involved in bringing it over to England. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes. They brought over the Sig Sally with them. There were two Sig Sallys made. One went to Washington, so it could be used by Roosevelt, but it was too big to be kept in the White House. And one that was on the same ship as my father's team of intelligence people came over on the Queen Elizabeth with them and was supposed to have gone to Washington, for Churchill to use, but it again was too big to fit into the place there. So they placed it
the War Office in
the War Office. There was no place for it because it was gigantic. It was the size of a room.
I know, it's amazing to think about now when we can talk through a telephone, a tiny handheld device,
So
how big all these things were.
the second Sig Sally ended up being sent to Selfridge's sub-basement, where they established what they called Eisenhower's bunker.
Okay, well, we'll get there in a minute. But I think we're going to look at the fact that Lou was supposed to be coming on a French luxury liner called the SS Normandy. And Muriel, do you know what happened to that?
Yeah, the Normandy caught fire, They thought it was arson, and all the fellows who were supposed to be on it to go to England and Scotland and England were sent home. So my husband came back to his family for Shabbat, and at that time there was a rabbi from Israel visiting in Hartford, Connecticut to raise money for Israel. And it was Shabbat, and my husband went over with his father to the rabbi to visit with the rabbi and a friend. And my father-in-law asked the rabbi to please bless his son because he was going abroad. And the rabbi blessed my husband and said, "You will not only come back safe and well, but you'll bring somebody with you." And that was it. Years later, when I was going with 2 children on Aliyah to Israel in 1970, that date was 40, I think.
Yeah.
When we were going in 1970 at the airport, the rabbi happened to be there. And my husband introduced us and said to him, "This is who I brought back from Israel." And he was going on the same plane as I was. He was going back to Israel, and we were going on Aliyah. And so it was like a full circle.
Amazing story. Absolutely amazing. Now, I'm just going to look at some equipment at Bletchley where your husband served, and I believe he's on the honours board. Is that right?
Yes, yes. When they showed me the machine later, it had all those discs that you saw just before, and it had all this wiring in red plastic covering. And if any of the wires touched one another, the machine would stop. And the girls who were working on it, the English wrens were working on it, used to keep those wires apart with a eyebrow tweezer. Concentrated work. And, it was just amazing. And I'll tell you later about when I used the machine.
Okay, so I'm just going to read this passage here that was written for the Jewish Chronicle only 3 years ago by the director of GCHQ, which is the successor to Bletchley. And in 2017, he said, the numbers of Jewish staff at Bletchley rose significantly as United States liaison officers joined the effort. This history matters to those of us working in GCHQ today. The values of freedom and democracy ran through Bletchley and motivate us still. It's not enough only to be legally compliant. Any government agency must have a strong sense of ethics. To remember, as Elie Wiesel put it, means to lend an ethical dimension to all endeavors and aspirations. Today, wrote Robert Harrigan in 2017, our strong partnership with our Israeli counterparts in signals intelligence is protecting people from terrorism as I write. As we establish the new National Cyber Security Center as part of GCHQ, we are building on an excellent cyber relationship with a range of Israeli bodies and the remarkable cyber industry in Beersheba. Your husband basically was a part of that, starting off that building of that link with Jews, which eventually became a strong link with Israel to this very day. Now, we're just going to have a look at a couple of photos, and we're going to understand why. There is some American soldiers having some matzah for Pesach at a GI Seder. There's another photo of somebody actually on the machine, one of the machines at Bletchley, and we've got a parachute wedding dress. And we're going to find out in a minute why that's the case. Okay. Tell me about Donington Road.
Donington Road, I was 8 years old when we moved from Hackney, Richmond Road in Hackney, to Donington Road. And that's where I lived until I got married and went to live in America. And my mother and father stayed on until their 90s in that house.
Good night, Einhorre. And just in case anybody knew them from Willesden, can you just remind us all of the names of your parents?
What was that?
To remind you of the names of Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah.
Your parents.
Their parents.
Your
Your
parents.
My parents' names.
Yeah.
My parents' names were David and Sally Bachman, Buchman. My father was a diamond jeweler in Hatton Garden in London, and he was one of the first members of the Diamond Bourse. I moved into the first new building in Hatton Garden at that time, 88 to 90 Hatton Garden was the address. And the Lunzer family, who were also very well known in England, were also in that building, in the same offices there. And he was a wholesale jeweler until he until he was about 80. And then he had to retire because his mind was not what it was.
Okay, so it's an amazing coincidence. I work at 63 to 66 Hatton Garden, and I've seen them, that it still has the Lunzer name on the outside of the building where Jack worked and your dad worked. And we're going to find out why Donington Road was the best place in the world to meet your Bashert.
I also want to mention that my mother was the first chairwoman of Wheatsoe in Willesden for many, many, many years, and she is on a plaque in a children's home in Ein Kerem in Jerusalem as for her efforts on behalf of Zionism and Wheatsoe.
Fantastic. That is fantastic. Now, here's a picture of you at your chuppah.
Yes.
I think I've got the... We'll need to go back on the story a minute. Hold on. Yes.
Okay.
Hold on. Here's you at the wedding. What a handsome man Lou was, and what a gorgeous looking bride you were. Tell me about your dress.
Yeah, the dress was a Worth novel that I got from a newspaper that my mother-in-law used to send American newspapers to my husband. And the couture in the West End of London copied it. And it was made from parachute silk, which came from John Lewis. John Lewis is a big department store.
Yeah, of course.
And they used to keep all the lovely materials for young girls who hadn't been married, who were still single, hadn't been, and they kept all these materials to sell to these young girls. So I got some of the parachute silk that they had.
Well, it looks like you had a soft landing. Now, so for members of our synagogue, Belmont in London, what's interesting is many started out their childhood in Willesden, but the shul itself is not far from Harrow. And your husband actually had his base in Harrow. Right. So how did he get from Harrow to Willesden to meet you? Tell us about that.
First of all, I want to tell you, for people who are living in Harrow, there was a Lewis family there. He was a sign writer, and he hosted the American boys for the first night Seder at his home. The American Jewish Committee used to send over matzahs and wine for them, and he made the first Seder. So all my husband wanted, actually, was the second Seder night. And he went to the Jewish Services Club. They were, by the way, stationed at the Latimer School, which is very well known in Harrow.
Yeah.
He went to the Jewish Services Club in Portland Place and asked for an Orthodox Jewish home for the second Seder night. And my cousin, who happened to be at the desk, didn't know of anybody who was Shomer Shabbos except our family. So she called my mother and said, could she host an American soldier? And my mother said she's awfully sorry, she has no room. My two brothers, Sidney and Louis, Sidney was in the Air Force, Louis was in the Army, were coming home for Seder, for the Pesach, and she was also having 6 Canadian boys, and she didn't have any room. So my cousin said he's the only one who ever asked for an Orthodox home. Said usually they just want a hot meal and with a Jewish family for the Hagim, but they never stipulated Orthodox. So my mother said, okay, we'll put more water in the soup, and because we were rationed, as you know, and we will sleep in with a neighbor, which happened to be Mr. and Mrs. Passes, Passes, who also lived in Donington Road. They had two boys, Monty and Norman. So that was how he got our phone number. And we used to talk on the phone quite a bit before Pesach, but we never met. And I mean, I think he told me how old he was, and I really thought he was much too old for me. So I said to my friend, he'll do for you because you're older. And she was my father's secretary in Hatch Garden. But so that was the way. I didn't even know he was bald because he wore a hat in the photo. So anyway, he came the second morning of Pesach, and he walked from Harrow on the Hill through Wembley, through Neasden, all these places to get to Willesden. And as he was at the top of Donington Road, my father was going to shul, and he saw this man looking at dresses. My husband was dressed in civvies because he was in intelligence. He didn't have to wear uniform. And he said to him, "Are you looking for the Buckman family?" And he said, "Yes." So my father said to him, "Go down the road to number 72 and knock on the door, and they will give you something to eat and drink, and my daughter will show you the way to shul." So that's how we met. I mean, he knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and he looked down because he was a lot taller than me. I was only 4'11" and a half, and he was 5'10". And and that's how we met.
Fantastic. And we'll just go back a slide here. Hold on.
Huh?
There we go. So Heathfield Park Shul, I've never seen it. I don't suppose it's around anymore. It's a magnificent shul. Big shul.
It was the Federation originally.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So,
The whole Aron Kodesh was gold leaf. It was gorgeous. And the choir was on the top at the back there. They had a lovely choir. Very nice choir.
oh, fantastic. So there you are. You're married to a GI.
Yeah. His parents couldn't come because there was no travel between countries. And my aunt and uncle, Avram and Friedel Brody, who, by the way, are grandparents to Robert Brody, that I understand you know.
Yeah, she was my dentist as a child.
So the grandparents stood in for his parents as Unterführer.
Oh, fantastic. Now, I just wanted to put this up because, of course, during the war, nobody was supposed to tell anybody what was going on.
Yeah.
And so you're meeting this guy who's 12 years older than you, who's arrives in civvies, but he's a guy from the US. And did he tell you anything about what he was doing?
What was that?
Did he tell you anything about what he was doing?
No, he never said a word. All I knew is that I was going to work in the morning as a legal secretary in Covent Garden, and he was coming home to sleep after being 3 days away. I never asked him because I knew he wouldn't tell me. We knew in those days not to ask questions. There was signs up all over the stations and bus stops, "Be like Dad, keep Mum." And people obeyed it. Nobody asked questions and nobody gave answers. And that was a secret well kept until 1970s, when after it was not through him that the secret was broken, but this Colonel Winterbottom, who was working on all of this, wrote a book called The Ultra Secret, and he gave a whole resume of the history of England during World War II, all the mistakes that were made, and how we muddled through, and how we won. and he also divulged about the secret code. And I don't know why they didn't put him in prison, because they had taken an oath for 30 years not to talk about it. Maybe the 30 years was over. It was just about. But he was honoured, I understand. He was given a medal by the king for the work he did.
I'm also surprised that I don't know about being imprisoned, but that he didn't get into deep trouble. I only learnt from an obituary in the Times that one of my teachers at high school had worked at Bletchley, and then one of my tutors from college. These people kept their secrets for a lifetime, and we didn't know what important work that they had ever done. That's really quite remarkable. Nowadays, everything's on the internet and everybody knows everything.
Yeah, now it sounds. By the way, the coding that my husband was doing also decoded the Japanese code as well as the Russian and German.
That's the Sig Sally, which continued another 20 years at least.
Wow.
So that was under wraps for 50 years.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
So
now,
he never spoke about it. And when they went to interview him by Yad Sarah here, by a journalist, when he touched on that part about his secret work, he said, "I'm sorry, I cannot talk about that at all." And he never did. He died without telling anybody.
Now, I think that you told me that he went to a theatre show with you?
Ah, yes. We went to a show at the Haymarket called Breaking the Code. My brother Sidney took us there. And he did say when he looked at the stage that that was exactly the setup that he worked in, but he didn't say anymore.
Okay. Now, you're just married, and before you know it, lovely Mazel Tov.
Yeah.
You're pregnant, and you've got to get to America. And I've found pictures of some of the planes that were used in that era. Not any ones that I would want to fly on. And you had, we're going to have a look at this in a minute, a 5-stop journey starting in Christchurch Airport, Bournemouth. So tell us about the different places you had to go and what happened in each place.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was pregnant and I wanted my children born in America. So I left from Christchurch on a Friday. My mother gave me 3 oranges because I was supposed to arrive the next day. And we got to Shannon and the weather was bad. So they took us 42 miles away to Limerick to a hotel there that didn't have any heating except by peat. And at that time, I was very nauseous. It was the beginning of the pregnancy, the first 4 months. And so I couldn't eat anything. And so I used the oranges. But of course, we were there longer than we were supposed to be. We were there a day and a half. And the American engineer said, if the weather gets worse, we're not going to take off at all. And so anyway, finally, a day and a half later, we did take off. By the way, they have no heating in the thing except peat. So we were given these ginger bottles with teats. They were made of ceramic, and they had hot water in them. They were called pigs. And,
yeah.
Yeah, and that's how we heated the things, because they weren't expecting such a big load of people from the plane. It was like, a movie. You see a plane lands in the jungle and all these people have to be accommodated somehow. So anyway, we took off, and this engineer came to me and he said, if we get to the point of no return, because the planes didn't have de-icers, he said, we'll have to go on. He said, but if it gets worse beforehand, we'll go back to Shannon. Fortunately, we went on, and we went to Iceland, which wasn't a scheduled stop at all. And they moved us out of the plane. You couldn't put your feet on the ice because it was slippery. and they moved us in, people with frog outfits moved us down in double lane into the hangar where they gave us goat's milk to drink. And so that was how we got off in Iceland. We stayed there a while and then we took off again for the scheduled stop, which was Shannon. Now this was January, I took off January 22nd. This was about January 24th. And we took the northern route, which was much colder than any other, of course, than any other route. And we got to Shannon, and then, of course, in the air, we went over the American. He pointed out New York. He pointed out Hartford, where I was going to live, and everything was so gorgeous, lit up by night. We had blackouts still in England when I left, and here was all these beautiful lights, and it looked like fairyland. It was so gorgeous. And we went on and on and on till we finally got to Philadelphia about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was already 5 days later. And we all got off the plane. And we, of course, customs were not very happy to be called out of bed at that time of the morning. They were very grumpy. I had round my neck my jewelry that my father had given me. And thank God everybody thought it was mothballs against catching the flu. But anyway, a man with me who was a friend of my father's from Belgium didn't speak any English, and they were going to take away his tefillin. And I explained to the customs, I said, this is his prayer shawl. He'll never give it up. I said, he uses it to pray. He's not going to sell it. They thought he brought it in to sell. And so they let him go, thank God. And my in-laws had been at a hotel called the St. Charles in Atlantic City, a Jewish hotel. And it had a funny Gaussian name, St. Charles, but that was it. And they were coming every day by cab, by taxi, to Philadelphia Airport because nobody knew what happened to the plane. My husband did know when I was in Shannon, he did contact me and we spoke. And after that, nobody, we had no contact. And by the way, when I was on the plane, they were not pressurized. So they had to give me oxygen for a while.
Goodness gracious. So yeah. What I want to move on a little bit here, for those who are worried about flying today with coronavirus, it took you 5 days to get from Bournemouth to Philadelphia. There was a risk of icing on the plane, and so that people can understand how significant that risk is, we're just going to look at this, which is a plane landing on a roof at 44 Angus Road, Ruislip, and the significance of that address is amazing. I just was looking around to find a picture of a Dakota aeroplane. Tell me about 44 Angus Road.
I wasn't there at the time.
I'm pleased to hear it.
I saw it in the news. I don't know, what date was it?
It was December 1946.
Oh, so I was in America, and I saw it on the news in America. And afterwards, I learned that it was my cousin's house. And the plane landed a few feet away from the baby's cot. And thank God he wasn't affected. But unfortunately, his wife, who was at the door,
the
baby's mother, was taking in fish from the fishmonger when the plane crashed. And she had, I think she either got muscular dystrophy afterwards or multiple sclerosis, some neurological problem. And she suffered with it all her life. But the baby was not injured at all. And I understand the people walked off out of the plane and walked out the front door. Is that right?
Well, I don't know how they got the plane off the roof, but that's...
I don't know about that. By the way, my husband unit in Eastcott, where he worked, which is on the Stanmore line, built the airport there. So I don't know what happened.
Well, I presume that this must have been from Northolt Airport, and the public inquiry about this crash said that it was because of ice on the wings. So you were very lucky that you got to America in one piece. And here's your route
Yeah.
from London to Shannon, from Shannon to Reykjavik, Reykjavik to Gander, and Gander to Philadelphia.
I will say that Philadelphia has the worst drinking water in the world. I don't usually drink water, but when I got off the plane, I asked for some water because I felt a little bit faint, and that was it. And I said, my God, what kind of a country have I come to? But I understand they all drink bottled water there.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's any better today. Who knows? Now, we're going to move on. Back in the USA, your husband went to work for who?
He worked for Hamilton Standard that made the propellers for the airplanes at Pratt and Whitney. And he was quality control for all the wiring. And he did all the wiring for the moon suits. And it saved their lives because evidently something caught fire in the cabin of the shuttle, and the moon suits saved their lives. Neil Armstrong came to Hamilton Standard to thank the team for the marvelous job that they've done on the wiring.
Okay, let's just see if we can see a shot of the success of this.
They made
No, just listen now.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
Every precious minute of their 2.5 hours on the surface was programmed. Rock and soil samples were to be collected, photographs taken, experiments set up to catch unfiltered particles from the sun, to record moonquakes, to measure precisely by laser beam reflection the exact distance between moon and Earth.
Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over.
Houston, Columbia, Navigate, over.
Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They're setting up the flag now. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
Fantastic. That's really an amazing memory for us all. Oh, how am I going to get rid of that?
I believe in.
Okay, so that Neil went to thank everybody. Your husband signed off 9 separate pieces of equipment to make sure that everybody was safe and that space travel could happen. Yep.
right.
Amazing. So we're now into...
David, another piece. I believe my father was in London watching this on the television in my grandparents' living room.
Yeah.
He was on a visit to England when this took place, and we all watched the landing on the moon from 72 Donington Road.
Actually,
I remember watching it from Rosh Pinna. I was on an Israel program. It's absolutely amazing. So firstly, Lou is been helping in the war effort in a huge way, and then he's seriously involved in the equipment for the lunar landing. So that would be more than most people would achieve in their lives, and no doubt he was ready for retirement, except that isn't what happened. We are going to go. You decide to make Aliyah to Israel. Hold on. And you get, your husband got offered a job in the aviation industry. And by now we're at 19, let's think,
70.
1970.
Right.
This, of course, is a later photograph of 1970. So who did your husband go and work for?
Who did he go to work for?
he didn't want to work in Herzliya, where the Air Force had their place, because we had young children and we wanted them in Jerusalem, and that's where we wanted to live. And they didn't have transportation then between the two cities. I think they do now, but I don't think they did then. And so the Israeli military industries kept contacting him. He had a job here, working for a fellow who did what's the name of the
circuit breakers.
Circuit breakers. Because there were always electric current cuts here in the country at the time, because we were under then the Jordan Electric Company, and but he couldn't get jobs because the jobs were being offered to people in Africa who didn't charge so much for the labor. So IMI asked him would he go to work for them. So he got permission to break his contract with this other fellow in Jerusalem, and he went to work for IMI. They met him in a cafe in Kerem, all hush hush, and they gave him a form to fill out. And at that time, it was December 1970, my father died in London, and we both went to London for the funeral, which also was, I never got to the funeral because of fog. But anyway, he posted the letter in a box. And when we came back, we were away there a month in London. When we came back, I contacted them. What happened to the form that we gave you? He said, I put it in the mail. They said, you should never have done that. That it's supposed to go into a secret box, and you will never get it. So they interviewed him, and he got the job at IMA doing metal fatigue. Metal fatigue was very much in the news at that time. Orwell wrote a book called No Way Out, about the best place to sit in a plane if it was going to crash.
Yeah, I think that was Neville Shute.
Yeah, Neville Shute, that's it, Neville Shute.
So your husband has started out, he'd been involved in electrics, space suits. Now he's doing metal fatigue. He's 58, 59 years old, and you've just started a new life in Israel.
Right. He also, by the way, worked on the first pacemakers in Heart. Yeah, that's also what he did, which was very useful.
I would think so.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so he worked for IMI until he was 70. He was supposed to retire at 60, but they kept calling him back. And eventually he recommended, what's his name? Tanya Edelstein, Yuli Edelstein's wife. She was from Russia. She actually was a metallurgist. She had a degree in it, and he recommended her to take over his job.
Ah.
She worked until she died. She worked for Israel Aircraft Industries.
Yeah, and that's opposite the outskirts of Ben Gurion Airport now, just near Terminal 1.
Right, right.
Now, it's the Yom Kippur War, and Lou has to play an important role in this as well. How did that happen? What did he have to do?
Well, in the Yom Kippur War, he used to walk from. I was in England at the time when it broke out, and he was staying with his mother in Kiryat Shmuel. And he used to walk they had to work on Shabbos, so he had to walk from there to En Kerem.
Whoa, that is longer than from Willesden, from Harrow on the Hill to Willesden. That is a schlep and a half.
Right, and they used pencils instead of pen on Shabbos because he was Orthodox. And he worked there on what he had to do, his work, whatever it was.
Okay, so he not only did he help in the Second World War, but he helped in the Yom Kippur War, and in between times, the Loon landing.
What about
Now we're going to go to Masada.
David?
And
talk about the exchange of motors that he worked on. I don't even know that she knew it at the time. Okay, the part of the the story was that he never came home the whole period of time during the Yom Kippur War, because as planes were coming into Israel, when they were finally released by Kissinger, there were planes that were made at Pratt & Whitney, and he had built those engines. And as they arrived in Israel, he immediately rewired them for use from the Israeli Air Force so they could be flown out into action.
okay, thanks for that.
No, my mother wasn't in the country at the time. It's information we found out afterwards.
Okay, so we're now going to go to Masada and find out why we're doing that. Let's just have a quick look to remind everybody, in case anybody's forgotten what Masada looks like.
My oldest
Wait.
Okay, let's find out why we were looking at Masada. Okay, here the two of you are in Masada. Tell us about it.
It's a nice picture.
It is?
Yeah, that's beautiful. When my husband, unfortunately, he retired at 70. He came down with Parkinson's disease. And of course, he had it for 15 years before he passed away.
Huh.
Now, what year was it that it died?
I think it was 1992.
So I don't know how old he was.
80, because he's born in 1912.
He was born in 1912. And this was
1992.
So he was pretty old. 80 years old. And we wanted him to, my grandson, oldest grandson, David, grandson, I'm sorry, I'm missing generations. He was getting his graduating, his cap at the top of, was it his cap or his thing?
His beret.
His beret. So my husband, we wanted him to go up in the airlift, but he wouldn't. He said he's going to climb it, and he climbed. And of course, it was taking him a long time, and they were waiting at the top. I was at the top already, and all the soldiers was up there with ice and drinks for everybody who came up and who were walking up. And he never came up. And you tell the story, Lisa.
No,
I mean, was it the captain?
The captain, okay, Samia, who waited to the last minute to go up to start the ceremony, was on his way with some of his soldiers and sees my father. And when my father explained he was on the way to his grandson's graduation at the top, Samia went ahead. He sent down soldiers to assist my father. They offered to carry him. They brought him drinks, and they escorted my father the rest of the way. In the meantime, the ceremony was about to begin, and he announced that if everyone would be patient, they were waiting for a very important guest to arrive. And when my father got there, he said that this gentleman who's just arrived fought the Nazis in World War II.
Very, very moving. So, really a remarkable life. I'm going to stop the pictures now. And we're back to you, Muriel. Hello.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for sharing the remarkable story of your two lives.
My pleasure.
And you've lived your husband's been an amazing scientist, made so much difference to the Jewish world and indeed to the whole world. Pacemakers I didn't know about, the moon landing. You've been a journeyed lady and a courageous young bride at the age of 19, going off to America and then starting your life in Israel. Muriel, I want to thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
For sharing your story and for sharing your husband's story. And you should live to 120.
Thank you. Thank you very much.